me breakfast, will ya? Will ya? I'm so hungry.
You love Mork and Mindy for how strange it is. But chances are, you never really understood that strangeness all the way through. The show is about Mork, an alien from the planet Ork, who lands on Earth and struggles to figure out how humans work. It sounds playful, a little naive. And yes, that is a big part of the show's charm. But that is only the part everybody remembers. Behind that odd, charming, and seemingly harmless world is something far stranger than most viewers ever noticed. Far more. And honestly, even the people who loved this show the most, you and me included, missed quite a bit. Confusing decisions from the network, strange behind-the-scenes secrets, and even a few darker corners most of us never got to see. Let's take a look at 20 of the strangest truths surrounding this show, and by the end of it, you might find yourself loving it even more. Number 20. The strangest audition that created Mork. I have heard plenty of wild audition stories from Hollywood, but the one about Robin Williams walking in to read for Mork feels so perfect, it almost sounds like something someone made up later. Gary Marshall told him to sit down. A normal actor would pull up a chair, adjust their posture, and start reading lines like everyone else. Robin Williams did nothing normal at all. He sat on his head on the chair. That was it, and Marshall later said that moment convinced him he had found the right person, because this was the only alien who showed up to audition. What fascinates me about this story is not just that it is funny, it is that the strangeness lines up perfectly with the spirit of Mork and Mindy. In another show, an audition like that might have felt too much, too chaotic, too hard to control. But for Mork, it was exactly the right answer. They did not need someone to play an alien. They needed someone who could make the whole room believe he truly was not from here. And sometimes, at its best, American television worked exactly like that, not through formulas, but through instinct. Once they found the right person for that bizarre world, the next problem came from something much simpler: the title. Let's move to number 19, and this one might actually make you sweat a little. Number 19. This show had some terrible titles. A show can survive on its star, its concept, even on luck. But if it carries the wrong title, it can die before anyone even gives it a chance. And that is what makes this story genuinely stressful to think about. Before becoming Mork and Mindy, Gary Marshall came up with names like Mork from Ork and the Mork Chronicles. Just listen to those. One sounds like a joke that would not last 5 minutes. The other feels heavy, cold, and way too self-important, like a science fiction show trying too hard to sound serious. Honestly, if I were a viewer back in 1978 and saw the Mork Chronicles on the schedule, I am not even sure I would bother turning on the television. And that is the strange part. They already had Robin Williams. They already had an idea unusual enough to stick in your mind, and they still almost gave it a completely wrong label. Then finally, Marshall landed on Mork and Mindy, and everything suddenly snapped into the right orbit. Television history can be frustratingly fragile sometimes. One wrong decision in a meeting room, one bad title getting approved, and this entire show might have been remembered very differently. And unfortunately, the story behind Mork and Mindy does not always stay in that lighthearted territory. Number 18. The Dark Side. Mork and Mindy never wanted you to see.
Mindy, you can do it! Fly! It's all right!
This is the part of the story that honestly, a lot of us never wanted to think about. We remember Mork and Mindy as this strange breeze across American television, the kind of show that lights up a whole room the moment it comes on. Robin Williams stepped onto the screen like he was plugged into some other planet. Everything about him was fast, alive, electric, and impossible to ignore. But years later, Robin shared something that feels much heavier. He said he started using cocaine right on set, not because of temptation in the way people usually imagine Hollywood, but because he did not know what to do with himself in the quiet moments between scenes. Around him were crew members, visiting audiences, famous faces, just standing there watching. And him, under all that light, was still just a young man who felt so out of place he did not even know where to put himself. A man who could make the entire country laugh until they could not breathe and still feel that alone the moment the cameras stopped. Hollywood in that era was very good at discovering talent, but discovering someone that bright and knowing how to protect that person are two completely different things. Number 17. Mork and Mindy has an older shadow behind it. The older I get, the more I like going back to old shows in a different way. Not just to remember how much I loved them, but to see what else is sitting quietly underneath that familiar surface. And with Mork and Mindy, I always get this strange feeling when I rewatch it. On the surface, it feels very 1978, very post-Star Wars, very Robin Williams. But somewhere inside it, I still hear an older rhythm, a very Hollywood kind of rhythm. And one day, it clicked when I connected it to Visit to a Small Planet. Suddenly, everything made sense. A quirky alien visitor, a young woman on Earth acting as the emotional anchor, the clash between alien logic and human life. Even the idea of reporting back to a higher authority is there. It all feels very familiar, does it not? What I love about this is that it does not take anything away from Mork and Mindy. If anything, it makes it more interesting. Because this is something Hollywood had already done before, but by the late 70s, it was powered by a completely different kind of energy. Robin Williams walked in and turned an old template into something faster, wilder, and far more alive. That is the kind of magic Hollywood at its best could sometimes create. Number 16. Mork's spacesuit was recycled from Star Trek. Let me ask you something quickly. Every time you see Mork step out in that silver suit, does it feel familiar? Like you have seen it somewhere before, you just cannot quite place which spaceship it came from, and you are not imagining it. Mork's outfit, along with a few other astronaut costumes in the show, is believed to have come from the Star Trek wardrobe department. That alone tells you a lot about how Hollywood used to operate. They did not treat everything like it had to be brand new, custom built and polished to perfection. Back then, if a costume still worked, it still had a future. Today, it belongs to one universe. Tomorrow, it can jump into another, as long as it still looks convincing on screen. Number 15. One decision from ABC sent Mork and Mindy into decline. There are decisions networks make that even decades later still make you want to sit down and just shake your head. Mork and Mindy in its first season was not a modest success that needed fixing. It was a genuine breakout hit. The show ranked number 3 in the Nielsen ratings across the United States, only behind Laverne and Shirley and Three's Company. It even outperformed Happy Days, the very show that introduced Mork in the first place. In simple terms, ABC was holding a golden goose in one of the best time slots of the week. And then they decided to improve it. ABC moved Mork and Mindy from Thursday nights to Sunday in what looked like a strategic move after Battlestar Galactica was canceled. On paper, that might have sounded smart. In reality, it was the kind of decision that stripped a show of its most valuable momentum. The audience was pulled out of their Pravitchka. The winning streak was broken, and a show that was flying high suddenly had to relearn how to stay balanced. What frustrates me most is this. Sometimes a show does not need to be fixed, it just needs to be left alone. But the behind-the-scenes story of Mork and Mindy was never that peaceful for very long, and this was only one front in a much bigger battle. Number 14. Mork and Mindy had to fight its own network, just to stay alive. You sit in front of the screen, laughing with Mork, everything feeling light, harmless, playful. But behind the scenes, people were arguing over everything. Not over money, not over schedules, over words, over ideas, over how far the show was allowed to go. At times, even a single word was enough to make the network nervous. Pregnant was not allowed. It had to be changed to "I am having a baby." Then came the subject of death. The writers wanted Mork to engage with it in a more serious way. The network did not. They wanted everything softer, safer, more controlled. And that is what always makes me feel both amused and frustrated when I think about American television from that era. They wanted a show that was different enough to stand out. But the moment it became a little too different, someone would step in and try to pull it back. And that is why I respect Mork and Mindy more than most people realize. This show did not survive because it played it safe. It survived because even with all those hands trying to smooth it out, it still kept some of its rough edges. And in the end, the strangeness of this show was never just about what happened behind the scenes. Even the world Mork came from was strange, in a way no one could have made up. Number 13. Orkans evolved from chickens.
I'm telling you the truth. I'm not lying.
This is the kind of detail Mork and Mindy throws at you with such a straight face that you almost think you misheard it. But no, you heard it correctly. The people of Mork's own kind, according to the show's internal logic, evolved from chickens. Humans come from primates. Orkans come from chickens. That one idea alone tells you everything about this show. It never wanted to be science fiction in the traditional sense, serious, cold, full of technical language and blinking control panels. It chose a completely different path. It twists everything just slightly off-center, then keeps a straight face as if it all makes perfect sense. And honestly, that is exactly what Mork and Mindy is. A show that from the very beginning runs on its own peculiar logic. If the main character is already strange enough, off enough clearly from somewhere no one can fully explain, then his home planet cannot be ordinary either. Not an eagle, not some superior life form, a chicken. Number 12. The script left space for Robin Williams to improvise. If you really want to understand how strange Mork and Mindy could get, do not just watch Robin Williams. Look at how the show was written for him. In most sitcoms, the script is law. Every line is fixed. Every beat is controlled. Here, not exactly. There were moments when the writers would build the structure, then leave open space with something like, "At this point, Robin will do something." Just the idea that a primetime network show would hand over part of its runtime to an actor's instinct is already unusual. But that was Mork and Mindy. They understood very early that if they locked Robin Williams into something too tight, the show would lose the very energy that made it alive. So instead of forcing him down a fixed track, they laid out a path and stepped back to see where he would take it. Later on, when Jonathan Winters joined the show, that energy went even further. And if you have ever seen Pam Dawber trying to keep a straight face in a scene, chances are you were watching a small battle unfold. Mindy standing still, while Robin, right in front of her, was trying to make the entire set break into laughter. Number 11. ABC once worried. Jay Leno would scare children. Maybe only Hollywood could come up with something like that. Before he became the king of the late-night desk, before that chin turned into a piece of American television branding, Jay Leno once auditioned for Mork and Mindy. That part alone is already funny. But the truly funny part is why he did not get cast. According to Leno, one ABC executive looked at him and came to a very simple conclusion. This face is going to scare children. Just stop there for a second and think about that. The very same system looked at Robin Williams and said, "Yes, that is our alien." Then that same system looked at Jay Leno and decided, "No, this guy might be a little too much for American kids sitting in front of the television around dinner time." I have always found casting stories like that both hilarious and fascinating. Hollywood can be almost frighteningly sharp-eyed sometimes. Number 10. Pam Dawber is the only original cast member still alive. At some point when you go back and watch old shows, you love the feeling is not quite the same anymore. Not because the show changed. The show is still there. The same old scenes, the same old house, the same old faces. It is just that one day you suddenly realize that in real life so many people from that world are gone now. That is exactly the feeling Mork and Mindy gives now. After Conrad Janis passed away on March 1st, 2022, Pam Dawber almost became the last remaining member of the original cast if you do not count a few faces who came later but appeared regularly. The moment you hear that the whole show seems to change color. Mindy is no longer just the young woman standing in the middle of the chaos to keep Mork grounded. She feels more like the last thread still connecting straight back to the original world of the show. Number 9. The version of Mork and Mindy you remember may not be the original one. You grow up with a show, watch it again and again for years, remember its rhythm clearly, remember how it feels, and then at some point you realize that maybe you never actually watched the same version as the people who saw it when it first aired. Mork and Mindy is one of those cases. The original broadcast run had 91 episodes, but when it was packaged for reruns, it became 95 half-hours. Put simply, the version that lived in the memory of a lot of viewers through reruns no longer kept the original rhythm intact. The hour-long episodes may have been split apart. The pacing changed. The feeling of moving through a whole story changed with it. So, your memory may not be wrong at all. It just may belong to a different broadcast life. And really, that fits Mork and Mindy in a strangely perfect way. Even the memory of this show comes in more than one version. Number 8. Robin Williams went from unknown to the face of America. Some stars rise slowly. One small role, then a better one. Then, years later, they finally become a major name. Robin Williams with Mork and Mindy was not like that. He almost exploded into fame in a single flash. One day, he was still a young actor, making a few people in the business look up and take notice. A few months later, he was a face the entire country knew. That is what still stuns me every time I look back at this show. We are used to remembering Robin Williams as an icon, as if he had always been there. But Mork and Mindy caught the exact moment right before that whole door flew open. This show did not just give him a role. It threw him straight into the living rooms of millions of American families with an energy nobody could confuse with anyone else. Number 7. They brought in Robin Williams' idol to save the show. When a show starts losing steam, networks usually do the familiar things. Change the time slot, add a new character, push the story further. Mork and Mindy did those things too. But there was one move that was far more interesting. They brought in the person Robin Williams admired most. That was Jonathan Winters. If you understand Robin Williams, then you understand what that name means. This was not just a famous comedian. This was someone Robin genuinely respected. The kind of person who could walk onto a set and instantly change the energy in the room. So, when Gary Marshall brought Jonathan Winters into the show first, in Season 3, then kept him around in Season 4, as Mirth, it was not just about adding a big name to pull viewers back. It was about dropping Robin's idol right into the middle of Mork's world. Number 6. During Mork and Mindy, Robin Williams was dating a real comedian. This is a fun one. While Mork and Mindy was in production, Robin Williams was dating comedian and actress Elaine Boozler. The second I heard that, I had exactly one reaction: of course he was. Because if anyone in that period was living like a whirlwind, it was Robin Williams. On screen, he was Mork. Off screen, he was with a woman who also belonged to the world of comedy. Put another way, the air around Robin at that point was almost wrapped in laughter, quick wit, and that very specific energy only comedy people seem to carry. This is not the kind of story that changes television history. But it is one of those lovely little behind-the-scenes details. It helps bring Robin Williams in the Mork and Mindy years into slightly sharper focus, young, bright, busy, and always living very close to the center of that comic storm. Number 5. Exidor is the son of Exeter, who appeared in the film This Island Earth. This is where Mork and Mindy starts playing the kind of game I absolutely love. It makes you think you are just watching a weird character for fun. Then, all at once, it pulls an older layer of science fiction memory right up with it. Exidor was always that kind of character. He walks into the show like a true eccentric, speaking off rhythm, behaving like his mind is always moving faster than the rest of the world. But then you dig a little deeper, and suddenly everything changes color. Exidor is not just Exidor. He is also identified as the son of Exeter, the character from This Island Earth from 1955. That is the kind of detail that makes people who love old movies sit up straight immediately. Because that is the moment you realize Mork and Mindy is not just playing around with sitcoms. It is also quietly looking back at a whole earlier era of American science fiction cinema. Back when flying saucers still gleamed, aliens still spoke like they had stepped out of an atomic age dream, and Hollywood still believed the universe was a place that felt both frightening and a little funny. Number 4. Mork and Mindy almost did not have a pilot. Some shows get pitched in the most proper traditional way. A full pilot, a clear structure, everything neat and polished like a clean sales package. Mork and Mindy was not really like that. And honestly, that suits it perfectly. What they brought in to sell was almost not a pilot in the usual sense at all. They took Robin Williams' footage from his appearance on Happy Days, combined it with footage of Pam Dawber from an earlier unsuccessful pilot, and then put one very simple question on the table. What happens if a bizarre alien meets a very ordinary young woman? That was enough. The show almost entered the world through a patchwork, a guess, and a whole lot of instinct. And I have to say, that is exactly the kind of origin story that fits Mork and Mindy. Number 3. Mork and Mindy got Emmy attention in its first season. Mork and Mindy was not just a hit in American living rooms. It rose so quickly that the television industry could not pretend not to notice it. In its very first season, the show picked up 2 primetime Emmy nominations, one for the comedy series itself and one for Robin Williams in the lead actor category. That sounds simple when you say it quickly, but it really matters. Because Mork and Mindy was not the kind of polished, respectable sitcom people automatically picture when they think of awards. It was strange, unruly, and powered by an energy that almost never sat still. And Robin Williams looked even less like the safe television actor type. He burst onto the screen like a strong wind. Too fast, too strange, too alive. That is exactly why those 2 nominations mattered. They showed that Mork and Mindy was not just making audiences laugh. It was forcing the whole television system to turn around and take it seriously. Number 2. Mork and Mindy had a real house in Boulder. There is something I have always loved about Mork and Mindy. In the middle of all the alien business, all the offbeat energy, all the things that stop feeling anything like everyday life. The second you think about them too much, this show still gave viewers something very real to hold on to. A real city, a real street, and a real house. The show was set in Boulder, Colorado. It sounds like such a poetic, carefully chosen decision, as if someone had sat down and weighed dozens of cities before finally landing on Boulder. But the truth is much simpler. Gary Marshall picked Boulder almost by accident, just because he had a relative studying in Colorado, and the name came to mind at the right moment. That was it. One of the strangest worlds in American television got rooted in the ground through a very accidental choice. And then there was that house, 1619 Pine Street. Just an exterior, really, but to a lot of people that was Mork and Mindy. That was what made the whole show touch real life. An alien might come from Ork, but viewers still need a porch, a window frame someplace that lets them believe this story is really happening somewhere. Maybe that is why addresses like that always feel strangely powerful to me. They keep memory standing still. But then again, because this show once had such a clearly defined home, the final truth about the way it disappeared feels even stranger, and sadder too. Let us open up the last secret. Number 1. Mork and Mindy never got a proper goodbye. Some shows are sent off like honored guests. The lights soften, the music rises. Everything closes in a way that makes the audience feel, yes, this is complete now. Mork and Mindy never got that kind of luck, and maybe that is the thing that makes me saddest when I look back over the whole strange, charming, messy, and very alive journey of this show. Because this was not some tiny little show that drifted by and vanished without a trace. This was a real television phenomenon. This was where Robin Williams burst out like lightning, where an idea that sounded impossible to sustain somehow reached deep into the memory of a whole generation. And yet, after season 4, the show was cancelled. Just like that. No major ending, no proper farewell. And according to an account repeated years later, Robin Williams even found out through Variety. That detail has always felt strangely cold to me. A world that had once been so noisy and alive ultimately closed with a dry little item in a trade paper. Hollywood is often like that. When a show is soaring, people call it a phenomenon. The second it starts to wobble, the machine turns away very quickly. But maybe that is also why Mork and Mindy stayed in people's memory for so long. It never got the chance to say goodbye properly. So that brings us to the end of one very strange journey through Mork and Mindy. And that is also what I have always loved about old shows from Hollywood's golden years. You go back to them thinking you remember them clearly, but the deeper you dig, the more you realize that behind a sitcom that once felt so light is a whole maze of unbelievable auditions behind the scenes, battles, network, decisions that make you shake your head, different broadcast versions, and even sorrows the audience never saw back then. Now I really want to hear from you. Out of everything we just went through, which detail surprised you the most? Which one made you see Mork and Mindy differently? And what classic film or series would you like us to dig back into next time? If you enjoy this kind of storytelling about old movies, old television, strange behind the scenes, history, and Hollywood memories that never really grow old, leave a comment like this video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next time we open one of these. Back up. I will see you in the next video. But there is something interesting about the shows that live the longest in our memories. The more familiar they feel, the easier it is to think we already know everything about them. But behind it, there is an entire layer of backstage stories that many viewers have never heard. So today, we are heading back to Hazard County and uncovering the most fascinating secrets behind the Dukes of Hazzard. And trust me, a few of them may make you see this series in a completely different way.